at a location that I've been wanting to come to for years, and I'm finally here. I got invited to come here to Apricot Lane Farms to have a discussion about climate, health, and food justice. So this is our schedule. We're gonna do a 10 a.m. kickoff, then a 10:35 breakout conversations. 11:50, we're gonna do a regroup. 12, we're gonna have a lunch. 12:45, a farm tour, and then we're gonna do a closing and share out of the session of the day. I'm really excited for great conversations around those topics. It's hosted by Rare, Food for a Better Future. Now, if you see here, it says, a food I grew to love. Well, I have the word nothing on here because I've always loved everything. I haven't had anything that I disliked that I then became something that I appreciated. So, oh, I found the goats. Look, I found the goats. Hi, guys. Come here. Hello. Hi, friend. Here. Hi. Oh, cutie. Hi, guys. Hi. I don't have any food, but you're cute. You're so cute.
Act and grew up acting. I'm an LA native, but my family is Italian, grew up around food. My nonna was so passionate about cooking, so it was really all I kind of knew growing up. That's how we passed our time. So it's a big part of my life. I have 2 kids. I spend so much time in the kitchen. And as I've actually, I'd like to say as I've gotten older, but it was so important, even as a kid, I actually became vegan at 10 years old, vegetarian at 5. So 26 years plant-based. And I think the core of why I made that decision was because I wanted to understand more about where our food was coming from. And I had such a heart for the ethics and living consciously. And so it's really just developed from there. I care about where my food comes from today. It's one of the reasons why my family and I frequent Apricot Farms. And I just want to instill those same values in my community, on social, with my family, my friends. It's just who I am and why I'm so passionate about being here today with you guys.
All right. Hi, hey, my name is Preacher Lawson. I'm a comedian. Knock, knock, who's there? I am. No, I'm also vegan. I decided to lose my friends about 8 years ago. No, but I like it. I for similar reasons, I'm gonna piggyback off that. I just wanted to, I got really curious where my food came from, and I want to, try to reduce my carbon footprint as much as possible. Right? That's why I don't have any kids. That's why I'm single on purpose. I do this on purpose. And I've been doing comedy about 16 years, and I cook all my food. So
Same.
yeah, it makes me feel better, because I don't know what else is in it. But sometimes I eat some food and I'm like, I don't know what's in it, but it's good. It's good. But yeah, that's who I am. Thank you. I also want to introduce Natalia from Rare. She does this whole thing, this nonprofit, global nonprofit, and I think you're doing a fantastic job. And I want to, send it over to you.
Awesome, thank you. Just on, yes, great. So excited to have you all here with us today. What a beautiful day, and what a beautiful place for this gathering. As Preacher mentioned, I'm part of Rare, specifically Rare's Entertainment Lab, working to support creators across big screens, medium screens, small screens, to kind of tell stories that reflect today and help inspire audiences at home. And for me, that's particularly when it comes to food. And today we've brought together lots of people that care about food, whether those working in the food system or those thinking about it and more on the content creation side. And really, we're trying to immerse together in kind of a space that is what's the best of what our food system can look like, but also have the hard conversations about what's the worst of the system looks like, and how can we be collaborating to close that gap. So everyone here, we think of as an expert in their own right, whether you're an expert in how to captivate audiences or an expert in soil health and different things. Our food systems folks that you'll be chatting to have a lot to share, but are also really, really interested in learning from all the creators that we have here today. So don't be shy, you don't need to know everything. We're here to open up conversations, get dialogues going, and have a really great day. So this is just the beginning of what we're hoping is a really exciting collaboration. And I just want to say a couple practical things. Throughout the day, if you need any help or anything, look for the name tags that have smileys. Not that other people won't help you, but we'll be extra helpful to you. So look for us for some support. And we've worked hard to try to keep this as a tight agenda with a lot to get through, including a delicious lunch, a great tour, lots of good conversations. But I'll be kind of playing bad cop and being a little bit of a timekeeper, so I might interrupt your conversations or try to be moving things around. You might see me tapping my watch in the corner. Don't be alarmed. It's not that I don't want you to continue talking, it's that we have a lot of different things to get through, and there'll be other moments where you can kind of keep those conversations going. But for now, I know people were mingling a little bit before, but we want to start off with a little icebreaker. So I'll hand it over to you guys to lead that.
Okay, icebreaker, that's what it says on the card. Here we go. I'm supposed to find one of you that I don't know, and I'm going to look at your badge that's around your neck and just sort of spiff from there. So here we go. And I actually kind of saw you guys and you look interesting, so I'm going to look at your card. Oh, those are pretty basic, really. Beets, sweet potatoes, you're kidding me. All right, I'll go with the beets. Let's talk about it. So we've got beets on your badge, and I kind of want to just get a gist for, where's the why? What brought you back to beets to begin with, and why didn't you love them to begin with?
I think I didn't love them before because, first of all, hi everyone. My name is Naja. Nice to meet you.
New friend.
I didn't like beets before because it was a product of groupthink. I was just a kid and no one liked beets, and then I was just like, why don't I like beets? So I started drinking them. Yeah, so drinking them, it was much easier. I like to drink them. But then eating them, I was like, I'm still not a fan. Then I started adding salt to it, and now I love beets. It was a very simple enhancement to it, but I don't know, I just feel like I feel healthy doing it. When I was a kid, I guess I associated it with eating dirt, but as I got older, it was a cool eating dirt. It's eating dirt that I'm allowed to eat.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So beets, I love beets. I eat them, I drink them. I can literally just take a bite out of one from the fridge, like an apple. So definitely came a long way with that.
Thanks for sharing your story about beets. It's inspiring. That's interesting. I couldn't think of anything. I grew up eating a lot of root vegetables. My nonna used to call it velduta, but it was basically anything that was green, and I had no idea until I went to Italy, and I was like, where's all the velduta? And they were like, it's the vegetable section on the menu. I was like, oh, that's what that is. But yes, I get it. I chose turmeric because I feel like that makes sense, right? Who eats that as a child?
Termites?
Or termites.
Yeah,
not
that's
necessarily
vegan.
vegan. All right, preacher, where's your icebreaker at?
Oh, okay, I got you.
All right. I'm going to kick it over to Daniela, Jake, and Jonah to give us a little grounding into where our food comes from and how the system came to be. I know different people are coming in with different levels of understanding there, so we wanted to have a little baseline as we start our conversations. And I think we've got another mic that should be
Oh, I can pass it to them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you wanna do that?
So anyway, I'll just kick it off right now. This is Jonah, this is Jake. They're going to be helping us spearhead this conversation in our Modern Ag 101. I'm supposed to set up the contrast here, so let me do that. We're here at Apricot Lane Farms, guys, obviously, and this is one of the best areas around. I live not too far, thankfully, so I'm able to really say that this is one of the most beautiful farms around in all aspects. And I don't know if you know a lot about them, and I'm sure we'll dive deeper in, but there's a great documentary you should check out if you haven't seen it already. But they're talking really about where our food comes from. So what I want to sort of set up here is how much of an exception to the rule is this particular farm? Oh,
Awesome. Thank you, Daniela, and thanks everyone for being here. This is really an amazing opportunity to talk about this issue of food systems and where food comes from that doesn't get spoken about enough, and so spreading more connection to production and the impacts that food production has on our bodies, on our food system, our economy, and our planet is essential. So I feel just so blessed and grateful to be able to have this conversation on this beautiful farm. And as you said, Daniela, this is not representative of the vast majority of farms in America. The other 95% of farms in America are not fit to host any groups. We would be trespassed or exposed to petrochemicals or a combination of the two. If you were to visit basically any other crop farm or animal agriculture farming operation. And so in contrast to those, I mean, Apricot Lane Farms is doing a great job of blending in the principles of ecology with economy and food production, taking care of the soil, understanding and applying the principles of nature to agriculture, and in doing so, you know, producing these amazing, high quality, super nutritious and delicious foods. And this is what we should be uplifting and celebrating and supporting with our dollars. And trying to do our best in a global food system to avoid the products that don't align with our desire for a healthy body, a healthy food system, and a healthy planet. We desperately need to protect the ecosystem services, the soil health, air and water, and the other resources that we know we need to sustain human civilization and plant and animal life on our beautiful planet. And so it's a gift and a real treat to be here. So thanks again so much.
I'll just add that, so I'm a farmer in Missouri, and we have a farm not quite as nice as this, and it certainly doesn't bloom as frequently as this. We have more seasonality, but we have a diversified farm. But the farms around us look really different. They tend to be hundreds of acres of corn or soybeans. They tend to be, laden with pesticides or herbicides to keep those things growing and put down weeds, those kinds of things. They tend to have less people on the land. You saw lots of people out here working today. A lot of farms in America really have been designed to try to move farmers off the land, unfortunately, which is not great for farmers either. And then, you know, the animals have sort of all, we'll see some animals here today. All the animals, lots of the animals on farms where I come from have been moved indoors, confined in barns, those sorts of things, instead of allowed to sort of be animals out here and enjoy the earth and that sort of thing. So it is quite a contrast.
Yes, I think we all are probably aware of that, but it's also such a good reminder to hear it straight from you guys, like how different this environment is in contrast to what farming really looks like for America and the mass population.
Group called Marked by COVID. I also work with food systems and a couple of other hats in my independent consulting, but with the work with Marked by COVID that brings me to this coalition is really advocating for farm workers and folks in the meatpacking industry who are on the front lines of our food system, whether it's a pandemic that breaks out, future pandemic, or other day-to-day harms, and ensuring that their voices are represented as we're looking for a more healthy as well as holistic food system that treats both nature and animals, but also people in a high welfare way. So excited to talk about health outside of like our own individual bodies, but kind of more in the community with you all this afternoon.
Hey everyone, I'm Becca Rogers. I got my start in this when I was studying neuroscience in school, and I started thinking about mad cow disease, which some of y'all might be familiar with. There was a big outbreak back in like the 90s in the UK. And I was thinking, well, given that this factory farming system has grown so big, how is it that we're not hearing about mad cow anymore? Like, what happened to that? And I started digging into it and learned that when it's in a human, it takes like 30 years to incubate. So you're not going to see signs. It also takes many years to incubate in a cow or animal, and you're not going to see signs in them either. And on top of that, in the US, only like 0.1% of cattle are tested for mad cow disease. And then the last scary part of that is that the guy who actually discovered these types of diseases, which are called prion diseases, he has said that Alzheimer's, other forms of dementia, actually mirror like mad cow in some ways in humans. and that it's very possible that this actually is still happening in humans, but it's just being misdiagnosed as something like Alzheimer's. So anyways, I learned that and I freaked out. Didn't go to medical school, which I wanted to do, and I decided to become an undercover investigator. I went to some farms, I went to a variety of different places with different species of animals, and very like traumatizing work, but like really rewarding, and got a little burnt out from that, and eventually went to work for New Roots Institute, where I'm working with students, so high school and college students around the world who want to become leaders in food system sustainability. So it's so cliche to say it, but I think the next generation is like our biggest hope. They're excited about this, they're passionate, and so that's what I work on now.
Great, thank you. Thank you both. So in terms of just kind of setting a lens for this conversation, because as I said, it's so easy to get caught up in the individual impact of the food system. I mean, how much control do you think individuals really have over health associated with food and our food system at large?
Yeah, I'll kick us off. I posed this question to the last group, but how many of you all have ever had food poisoning? Okay, yeah, I had food poisoning a couple months ago after eating just vegetables, because I'm plant-based, and really bad food poisoning, like severe, lasted a couple days, fever of like 104. And my friends were like, see, Becca, you can get food poisoning from plants, like just because you're plant-based, like, you know, it doesn't mean you're immune from that. And I dug into it more, and I learned that in California specifically, like 93% of the factory farms are actually located next to an irrigation source. So what could be happening, or what is happening, is that some of the plants, like lettuce and whatnot, is actually being infected with contaminated water that's like coming from the runoff of like these lagoons full of like animal feces. And so something like an E. coli outbreak, for example, in like 2019, there was this huge outbreak, like hundreds of people died, and that very likely just came from plants that had been contaminated by factory farms. So it's like very much intertwined. And to get back to your question, I had no control over getting food poisoning. I could go to the best restaurants or whatever, and it can still happen. So we don't have too much of control, but there's an illusion of control.
Yeah. And these are all policy decisions, right? Which is like what we were talking at the jump of just how this is a system.
I want to bring over to Daisy and Rachel, and I want you to kind of explain and help us out, you know, elaborate on what the difference is between that.
Am I jumping in first?
Yeah,
or you?
yeah.
Okay, so I'm Daisy Freund. I lead the Farm Animal Welfare Program for the ASPCA. You know us as sad commercials with Sarah McLachlan. But we do a lot more than that, and I'm proud of the piece that I get to work on. So first I'll just say what's fun about this is that Rachel and I go way back. About 13 years ago, we were both starting in farm animal welfare, babies in our career, and we don't get the chance to work together a lot because we have taken on factory farming in different ways. We've sort of chosen to solve for it from higher welfare farming and plant-based products respectively, but we're buddies, and also I think our coming together here really speaks to the overlaps in our work. I'll just say we also have similarities in that we came from like media and PR, ended up in the food world, the good food world, the restaurant scene, and then I think both of us had this feeling like there's not enough system change potential here on just food alone, even though it obviously brings people together and has so much power. Personally, I felt in the good food movement, that was what it was mostly called about 10, 15 years ago. There was so much emphasis on local. Maybe they talk about organic, sustainable, grass-fed, but people were, even our legends like Alice Waters, were avoiding talking about animal welfare like the plague. It was actually stark to me that all these people focused on the ills of the industrial food system or the benefits of buying locally were not dealing with animal welfare. And I at least started to realize that's because it is so uncomfortable. If you are going to continue to eat animal products, there's not a word for what you are if you're not vegan, but you care about the animals in the system. And so it can feel like there's not even a way to touch it. So I ended up going to a farm out of my restaurant background and worked on a pasture-based farm in the Hudson Valley of New York, where I'm from, raised animals, learned from the best. And I'll just say I learned two things that really have shaped where I've ended up. First is that farmers are some of the best animal advocates. The farmers raising animals are some of the best animal advocates that exist. I mean, you heard Jake earlier, he's one of my heroes, and he can express to you the need for change from his personal perspective. The farmer that I worked for was similar. I mean, he was a vehement activist against industrial agriculture and for animals to have lives worth living, and he was providing that every day. And so that's really shaped where I come from. And the other part was that even the consumers, the people who came to our farm and bought, you know, higher welfare, pasture-based products, they really didn't understand that this was such a small sliver of what was available, or even understand that the potentially organic dairy in their fridge was also from an industrial system. Like, they thought they were getting it right, and they were shocked to learn about what labels really do mean or don't mean. And so that ended up leading me into the ASPCA, because we have a massive base of animal-loving mainstream people who, you know, abhor cruelty, and so we've been able to shape our mission. And then I'll let you say what your mission is. But for us, we want to end factory farming, and to the extent that animals are raised, we want them outside on pasture with sun on their backs and dirt under their feet. We want far fewer animals in the system. And as has been said, the only way to get there is by combining reduction with higher welfare. Because if we take the 9.7 billion animals who are in our system slaughtered every year and put them out on pasture, we wouldn't have room for it. We would not have room for it. So we have to have this combination of less and better, and that's why we absolutely do not see these, you know, approaches as in opposition. They have to be coming together more than they are.
That was beautiful, Daisy. So I'll note that I'm so encouraged. A lot of the work that we do day in and day out can feel very heavy. I know a lot of the discussion topics today can get very heavy because the reality of the situation is it's fairly depressing. But there is a part of the U.S. population that is really banding together, and organizations that are banding together and really demanding a better food system in so many different ways. And there is a pathway forward for us. We do have power as organizations, as consumers, as folks that speak in such a connected way to our audiences for us to affect positive change. One thing that's so important to me, and it's such a pleasure to be, you know, kind of full circle back on stage with Daisy, because representing higher welfare animal products, representing the plant-based foods industry. By the way, that's what I do. I oversee the Plant-Based Foods Association, which represents the amazing industry of plant-based foods brands, and our charity sister organization, the Plant-Based Foods Institute. But the thing that has been, I think we need to move forward with, is saying that we are on the same side. And if we take this small sliver of the food industry that's focused on pushing forward plants and pushing forward meaningfully higher welfare, and we are seen or perceived as opposing forces, we will not win. We will not make progress. So we need to stand together. And someone who eats a plant-based diet, I am proud to sit on stage with people who are advocating for higher welfare treatment of animals. I'm proud to visit a facility like this. I am proud to work with and encourage people, regardless of where they're at on their journey, and regardless if plant-based is your ultimate goal. Wherever you are on your journey, if you are interested in affecting positive change, regardless of what that personally looks like for you, both in terms of choice and also feasibility. We talked about the lack of access in the system right now. Like, this needs to be a judgment-free space, and we need to come together and support each other's mission. And I think through that unity comes power. And I'll speak kind of briefly about the plant-based foods industry, or the Plant-Based Foods Association. But the Plant-Based Foods Association, we represent over 200 amazing brands that are creating plant-based food products, that are working really hard at making products, plant-based healthful products, more accessible to people. You know, it'd be amazing if we all, you know, listening to you all speak this morning, we all create our own food and our own meals from scratch. That'd be amazing. We also know that people have very real world constraints that are preventing that. So there are powerful parts of the industry. They're saying, we're going to meet consumers. We're going to make sure they have that non-dairy, that oat milk, that soy milk. We're going to make sure that they have a burger that's made from plants. You know, if they have to take their family through the drive-through to get dinner. one night. So we represent the common interests of that. And also through the Plant-Based Foods Institute is where we focus on harnessing the power of the food industry to create a world where business and values harmonize to create a food system that respects the dignity and health of all living beings in the planet. And you know, health is something we've talked about a lot, so important, health for people, animals, planet, and also dignity. That word was so thoughtfully chosen when we decided what our vision is, our guiding mission and vision for the organization, because we've heard that so many people are forced into undignified lives. And that is something that we need to address. And that's people who are working at the farm level, working in the slaughter facilities, and people who have been really marginalized through not having access to these kinds of foods. So that is our guiding force and what we're working towards. But a big thing I think is the making sure that that taking some control over how we eat is more appealing and accessible. And you know, I think one thing that holds us back is polarization from each other and polarization from the rest of the consumers who didn't choose to have the food choices that they do, and then also avoiding perfection and taking these pure. I mentioned I will never be a preachy plant-based eater, and I think all of us need to be making sure that we're not stressing perfection is the goal. I'm going to pause because I think Daisy might want to pick up on that.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I heard it in a couple of our groups. There's very valid concern amongst some of you as creators about raising these issues and alienating your audiences, appearing to be insensitive to the realities of cost. I mean, it's great to talk about pasture-based food, and when you go to the farmer's market, you all know how much more this costs. And so this is, first of all, something I invite you all to talk to us about. I think both of our organizations have really worked hard to find ways to message what we do to a mainstream audience. The ASPCA is, I mean, in every state, we are dealing with people who have real financial constraints and they hate cruelty. And so they really want to find a way forward. And so we've tried to find ways to break this down into tiny actions and to find ways to describe the change in a way that doesn't put the onus on the consumer, but does give people the feeling that they can be a part of the change. I mean, again, what Jake was saying is important, and I always try to say this to an audience. It's not everybody's job to buy pasture-based products. It just isn't. It's not realistic for everybody. But to the extent that you can maybe swap in a higher welfare product for a special occasion, do it once a week, take one of the products that you can actually find at your grocery store, and we actually list all the higher welfare products and farms on our site to try to make it easy. If you can do just one of those things, you are taking animals out of a bad system and you are investing in a better system. And the more that you all can say, I don't get it right, I don't do it perfectly, I break my own rules, I don't even know if there are rules, but I'm doing my best, and there are little ways that we can all do that, and it's really up to you to figure out what is possible for you. And if the financial part is not possible, the reality is this is a system that has been designed, and you have a vote. If nothing else, you have a vote, because the money, you know, I was just on the phone with a farmer this week who said, we could have any system we want. That's the reality. We could have any system we want. It comes down to where the policies are incentivizing agriculture. So that's hopeful to me, is that wherever you can make a difference, whether it's through talking to your representatives or, swapping out the type of chicken you buy once a month or something like that.
I think another thing we can do, I think those are all really great points, and there's lots of policy initiatives and acts that we can get involved in. Something else I think that is a huge opportunity in front of us is really highlighting that eating more plant-based foods is not there's a misperception around plant-based eating being this coastal, elite, and almost tech adjacent way of feeding yourselves. And I think by having that perpetuated, it really is dismissive of the deep cultural connection that we have to farming, to agriculture, to different cultures around the globe. I mean, Jake said this earlier, we've only been eating this way for several decades. You know, this really started after World War II and this consolidation of the food interest to benefit very few. But people have been drinking coconut milk longer than they've been drinking dairy milk from a cow. You know, people, and there's so many plant foods that have so deeply rooted into different diets and cultures. And being able to highlight that, and the last thing I'm going to say, preacher, I'm going to hand it back to you. I can tell you're ready. Like, enough. Is
feel like
that
double dutch.
I think that also, you know, folks that have been, you know, real in the vegan community for a while, plant-based community, have been like almost making people feel shamed about their food choices, and there's so much overwhelm around it that people, I think, they recoil because they're like, I don't have control over this, or I can't afford this. So I think something else we can do is inviting people to the party. That came up in one of the sessions I was at. This is fun. This is exciting. There are all these delicious foods. We eat so few crops that we can grow, and like having people tap into their culture, their roots, and an expansion of food choices and deliciousness. And
I'm wrapping it up, but I want to say I just really appreciate, you know, how passionate you all are of this, you know, situation, and it just, I think you really need people like that, and I totally agree with that, the way people view a lot of plant-based eaters as, you know, that, but thank you so much, you know, thank you so much, and we're gonna.
It's time to eat, and after eating, we have an amazing tour. We're actually going to walk around this farm and see great things in action. So, you know, we're saying some of the conversations a little sad at times. This is about to be the happy, fun part where we're having delicious food, much of it from the ingredients from this farm and from other great farms in California. And then, walking around, seeing things, and ending with a conversation where we're really looking at you guys and be like, okay, how can we help? What can we do? We've talked about some issues, we talked about some solutions, but how do we move this forward? So think of it as the fun time afternoon, and please head on up the stairs.
This concept called biomimicry that we'll talk about several times today. And biomimicry essentially just means recreating the systems that nature has already set in place for us, and in many cases looking to nature to solve some of our problems. And the three key players within that concept of biomimicry are animals, compost, and cover crops. So that's sort of the three pillars on which everything stands here. So we will try and highlight those three, animals, compost, and cover crop. They're the most important things here. We grow over 100 varieties of fruits and vegetables, herbs, and edible flowers on the farm over the course of the year. We also raise a number of animals on our pastures, including cows, sheep, pigs, chickens, and ducks. And so we're going to see a good chunk of those animals today as well. So with that, I'm just going to chat a little bit about the garden, and then we're going to dive into it, and we're going to leave this space. So this is our 2.1 acre market garden, and this space, really what we like to think of the garden is a small scale intensive, year-round food production system. We're growing a lot here, and we're constantly rotating and moving our crops and planting new things, right? And so we want to make sure that we're being really good stewards, that we're not over farming this land. So a lot of the things that we are doing is to make sure that we're not just being extractive, that we're putting things back into the soil, right? So we are practicing things like succession planting and companion planting, pairing crops together that are going to have a symbiotic relationship. Things like alliums and, vulnerable lettuces have a good relationship because the alliums, because they're smelly like onion and garlic, right? They're going to protect those lettuces from pests. So this is how we can, we're organic, we're certified organic, so we're not going to be applying pesticides, right, to the farm. And we also do crop rotation. We're moving things around constantly. Nothing is grown in one bed 2 years in a row. We do grow a lot of heavy feeders here, you know, potatoes, tomatoes, zucchini, things in the nightshade family. They draw a lot of nitrogen out of the soil. So we never want to overdraw any one single nutrient from the soil. So by moving things around, moving beds year to year, it's going to be super key in that idea. And also by moving things around constantly, we're keeping pests on their toes. If we had our tomatoes in the same bed year over year, every year they would know where to come back and get the good stuff, right? So we're constantly moving things around. We also practice cover cropping here in the garden. I mentioned cover crop is one of the pillars, right, of what we're doing here on the farm. So you're going to see cover crop around, you're going to see them in the orchards. It's going to look like, oh wow, they don't really take care of their weeds, but it's actually intentional. That's cover crop. Our cover crop mix is grasses, peas, legumes, vetch, clover. These are all crops that help to fix carbon and nitrogen. They draw it out of the atmosphere and fix it within their root system in the soil. So this is how we're able to restore any lost nutrients within the soil system. If we do have something, say like a tomato, like I mentioned, one of those heavy feeders, we'll follow it up with a cover crop so that we are restoring those nutrients into the soil, and it's nice and healthy for the next growing season when we're ready to plant something else. And it's really important as well, keeping the soil full of living roots. It kind of strengthens that mycelial network, that soil structure, that organic material. Having the cover crop really serves a lot of purposes, so we'll dive into that as well along the tour today. You may also notice that there's a lot of potential growing space here in the garden that has been sacrificed for long-term perennial plants. This is planned habitat where we're actively trying to invite animals into the garden that may be beneficial to us. So these plants provide thick habitat for animals like snakes and lizards and birds of prey that are going to help us to eat rodents that may be in the garden, kind of keep that rodent pressure down. And the blooms will attract pollinators, birds and bees, ladybugs, butterflies that are going to do that really amazing specialized pollination work for us. So it's really important here in the garden. We are going to talk about habitat a little bit later on, so we'll dive into it more there. But are there any initial questions about the garden or the farm or where we got started? Okay, wonderful. We just want to see it. I agree. So we are going to travel down the wormhole. We're going to go see some of our hardest working animals on the farm. So we'll have you guys follow us. We're going to head this way. So you guys might have seen some avocado trees as we were walking over here. We were talking about avocados. We grow about 40 acres worth of avocados here on the farm, and we have 18 different varieties. 40 acres is a lot when we sell direct to consumer, right? We only sell at farmers markets and a few grocery stores and like restaurants and things like that. So we couldn't possibly sell 40 acres worth of avocados, so we actually press a lot of it into avocado oil. It's a really beautiful product. We call it our liquid emerald because it's a really beautiful green color. And we also press olive oil as well. We have some olives here on the farm as well. Okay, I think we have everyone. Hi guys, come on in. All right, so we are here at our Soil Fertility Center. So I mentioned in the beginning that John and Molly really understood that soil health is the driving force behind flavorful and nutrient-dense produce, right? So if we are focusing on soil health, we're really laying the foundations for higher yield, higher quality crops, and farm longevity just as a whole. And so the number one way that we focus on soil health is through composting. And so composting essentially, you guys might be familiar with composting. It's the process of taking organic material, plant matter, and turning it into soil. It's speeding up that decomposition process. There's no waste in nature, right? So everything has to go somewhere. It's the rightful life cycle here on the farm. We produce a lot of waste, a lot of clippings from plants, and it has to go somewhere. And so why not turn it into more soil for the farm? So we practice two types of composting here on the farm. We do what's called hot compost and cold compost. This is our cold compost. I'll get to this in just a second. But with our hot composting, we're making what's called compost windrows. They're these very long, about 150 foot long rows full of organic material that we make right on the edge of our fruit orchards. And they're comprised of horse bedding from some of our neighbors, cow droppings from our cows here on farm, and any mulch or plant clippings from across the farm will be added in there as well. We mix all that material together. And whenever we're composting, we want to make sure that we're focusing on an aerobic composition. So by having the presence of oxygen, we are forcing the material that's present in the compost to actually decompose and to turn into compost. And through this process, a healthy soil food web will emerge in which there's a super diverse community of microorganisms. And the microorganisms systems will be moving. They're constantly moving. They're eating the material. They're helping to break it down. And they are thermophilic microorganisms, so they produce heat. It's, similar to if you're exercising. We walked here. It's a warm day. I'm sweating a little. So it's similar with those microorganisms. They are the ones that are producing the heat. That's why we call it hot compost. And the goal is for that compost to reach about 130 to 150 degrees. So it really does get up there. And that temperature spike will actually kill off any bad pathogens that may have been present in the material. It helps to properly break down. We call it sort of like earth, wind, and fire compost, because there's air, there's that oxygen, there's the earth, there's the material, there's heat, there's fire, right? And so all of these things in combination allows the process to, or the compost to fully break down. And it will break down for about 8 or so months. And from the windrow, we are able to spread that material directly onto our fruiting trees, adding really amazing nutrient density to the trees and to the soil. And it's not just about the trees and the health of the trees, but it is largely about the soil. When we have really healthy soil with a lot of organic material, it is essentially like a sponge, and it will hold on to water for far longer than soil that doesn't have microorganisms, and it doesn't have cover crop, right? If there's no life in the soil, it's dirt, it's dead, right? And so by adding the compost, by adding cover crops, by allowing things to be living and not just like cutting it all down, we are turning that soil into a sponge, and so it will hold on to water. I'm sure a lot of you are coming from Southern California. You may be familiar with some of the water challenges that come with being in Southern California. The first 10 years of the farm, we were in drought, right? And we didn't know when we were going to get water, and so we had to make sure that the soil was able to absorb every single drop of water that landed on this farm. And it does, right? We get these big rain events. The last 2 years, we got over 30 inches of rain per year, which was amazing. And we didn't see that water leave the farm. We have, there's a barranca right here that kind of runs in between our property, and it goes out to the ocean. And when we get big rain events, we are seeing, it's like a brown river. It's full of topsoil from other farms in this area. And we don't get that runoff, right? We don't see the rain that lands here taking our valuable topsoil out to the ocean. It stays here, the water soaks down. So the goal is to essentially slow and soak the movement of that water, of the rain that lands here. And we can use it for the future, fingers crossed. We draw all of our water from an aquifer, which is an underground water table. All the farms in this area get their water from the aquifer. And so we want to not just use less for right now, but actually work to regenerate our resources for the future. It's super important. So that's our hot compost. As I said, this is our cold compost bin. So this is our 40-foot vermicompost bin, or worm bin. Some of you guessed it when you walked in here. So with this bin, we are really tapping into that biomimicry piece that I mentioned in the beginning, right? We're recreating nature. So we're using earthworms in order to recreate topsoil in nature. If you think, the last time you went hiking, there's all kinds of things falling off of trees, plants and animals living and dying. And that material, over the course of hundreds and thousands of years, does decompose and contributes to healthy topsoil, to humus. And so we want to do that, but on a much, much faster scale. So that's where the worms come in. We use earthworms here. We use red wiggler worms. That's the type that they are. And earthworms are a powerhouse of biodiversity. There are microorganisms found in the gut of the earthworm that are found nowhere else on the planet. And so we're feeding them, and they are eating that material, and they're inoculating it with that special set of microorganisms. And what they poop out on the other side is vermicompost, or worm castings, or farmer's black gold, as it's often called. And we're able to apply that to the farm, after that process. So they are red wiggler worms, as I mentioned, and we've chosen them because they're surface dwellers. So they live in just the top couple inches of this bin. So if you guys are feeling brave, you can say hi to the worms. You just have to, you've already had lunch, right? So you can get your hands dirty. You just have to dig down an inch or so, and you should see them. I've got one here in my hand if anyone wants to see.
No.
What are all the little white things? So those little white things that you guys are seeing are called springtails. They're a type of arthropod. They are also a decomposer, and they help to kind of chew down on the fibrous material in this bin. So the worms, the springtails, you might also see ants or roly-polies. All of these creatures are decomposers, and they're helping to break down the material in this bin.
You were brave.
I gotta have one.
All right, hopefully you all have had a chance to say hi to some worms. So we are feeding them from the top. We feed them a mixture of some of our hot compost we'll actually add in here. We like to help kind of kickstart that decomposition process for the worms. And we also partner with local companies. We'll take juice scraps and spent coffee grounds off their hands. Any kitchen scraps from our staff will go in here. And they eat from the top, and then the vermicompost that comes out of the worms over the course of about 6 months makes its way to the bottom of this bin. So this is called a flow-through bin. It flows from top to bottom. And when we harvest, which we do about every other week, there's a motorized winch on one end, and we'll turn it on, and it runs a blade the length of this bin, cutting off just the bottom 2 inches, which will then fall to the floor. There's just an open grate down here, so you're welcome to feel down. And if you kind of, press on the material, it's just right out here.
Artwork.
Yeah. There's microbial
So this is our finished vermicompost, and we've had this tested, and we found that there are more than 1,800 types of beneficial bacteria present and 300 types of beneficial fungi. And in one handful of finished vermicompost, roughly what I have here, there are more beneficial microorganisms than there are humans on the planet. So we're talking 8 or 9 billion. It's a really incredible, highly concentrated material. From here, we're able to make compost tea. If you're familiar with compost tea, we'll take a little bit of this vermicompost and a lot of water, and we'll let it kind of bubble and aerate for about a day, about 24 hours. And that's where we hit sort of peak microbial life. So the microorganisms found in this vermicompost will actually multiply by over 500%. So it's like astronomical numbers. I can't even do that math. And from there, we're able to spread that vermicompost, the compost tea. We could do a pasture soak after our grazing animals have grazed through our pastures. We could do a foliar spray in our orchards. For the first handful of years of the farm, we were injecting it directly into our irrigation just to kind of kickstart everything, get things really healthy and going. But we are regulated now, right? We have healthy soil, we have a healthy farm, so we don't have to just blanket put it out everywhere. So we can be a little more specialized. We can be reactive or proactive based on the needs of the farm. And sort of by inoculating the farm with our compost, our vermicompost, and our compost tea, we are keeping that soil food web really in check. We are making sure that we're taking up all of the available real estate with these beneficial microorganisms so that there's no room for any bad pathogens to potentially get a foothold. Yes.
Why isn't composting more taught as a whole, and also why isn't it more encouraged like on a city or urban level?
Why isn't composting more talked about, more taught? Why isn't it encouraged on a city level? I can't really speak to that level. I know for farms, I mean, we're an independent farm, independently funded, and this is a whole complex built just for compost. And it's not always seen, there isn't a direct monetary return to composting, so it's not always seen as a valuable thing. That is about all I can speak to as far as individual farms. It does take a lot to kind of kickstart this process, but this is vital to a healthy farm system. So it should be talked about more, absolutely, and that's why we love what we do.
Quick question. I think you said earlier that you guys are able to have less runoff, I guess, when it rains and stuff like that. So to an extent, wouldn't that actually be a little bit beneficial to like urban areas? Like if they told us that, then like we'd have less runoff.
Absolutely, and all those little like patches in between the sidewalk and the road, turning that into grassy areas, or wildflowers, or something that brings in pollinators, or trees, and it holds on to that water. It's dual purpose, absolutely. I think that maybe the cause and effect is just not always understood.
Feel free to grab a spot along the fence here. Just be mindful that there is a hot wire on the inside of one portion of that fence, so be very careful.
That's a big old pig one. Is that a nutsack on his neck? That's kind of neck sack.
Oh my god.
I sneezed.
This little girl here is Itty Bitty, and I know that her name doesn't totally match her stature these days, but the name Itty Bitty came to be because Itty was actually the runt of her litter. And when Itty and her siblings were weaning from their mama, Itty kind of got tossed around a little bit. she wasn't getting access to all of the resources that our team would have wanted to see, so we actually decided to move her up here to this pasture for her safety. And this pasture is the ideal location for her because the building behind me here is our main barn, and this is, you know, tack room, or it used to be tack rooms and horse stalls, but it's since been converted into offices and tool rooms and break rooms. So we constantly have staff coming in and out of this area, and they're always stopping by Itty's pasture here, tossing her things like a ripe avocado or a piece of stone fruit, which she absolutely loves. So much so, though, that our livestock team does often consider her the most spoiled pig they have ever met, because she does tend to turn up her nose at things like cabbage and other greens that we do really want her to be eating from the garden. But Itty is a red wattle pig, and a red wattle is a heritage breed of livestock. Are you guys familiar with that term, heritage breed? Nice, yeah. So for those of you who don't know, a heritage breed is pretty similar to an heirloom variety of a fruit or a vegetable. But when it comes to animals, so an animal that has those kind of pre-industrialized genetics, and oftentimes these animals will adapt really seamlessly with these traditional farming techniques that we practice. So all of our livestock here on the farm is heritage breed, and again, that's just kind of what works best for us in our operations. These animals tend to be a little bit more gentle for our teams to work with, and again, hardy as well. And if you take a good look at Itty, particularly her snout, you'll probably notice that she's got this kind of flat, prolonged bone in her snout. It's really similar to the bone that we all have in our shins. And this allows her to dig deep into the soil and grab onto roots and tubers and grubs and things. So all day long she is foraging out within this pasture here, grabbing onto those good snacks. And then we also offer her a supplementary feed. It's a soy-free organic grain feed that we ferment with apple cider vinegar. And apple cider vinegar works in animals the same way it does in humans, just kind of helps to balance their gut health and up their nutrient intake. So that's a common theme across the board for all of our animals' diets here on the farm. And if you guys kind of want to turn your attention over to the pasture here, this pasture is really very special to us because this is actually where Emma the pig from the Biggest Little Farm spent her retirement years. And she is actually buried within this pasture today. So if you notice over here, the portion where the fence is kind of kicked out, Emma is actually buried on the opposite side there. And the pepper tree that is in front of this fence, Emma planted that herself. So when she was foraging around in the pasture here, she nosed a pink peppercorn into the ground, and the day that she passed away, our team decided to kick out that fence and leave the tree in memory of Emma. So a very, very special spot for everyone here on the team to kind of come and remember her and the impact that she had here on the farm. And something else that's really special about Emma's impact is all of the pigs that we have here on the farm are descendants of Emma. So Itty Bitty is one of her great-granddaughters, and Itty Bitties that are in there with her now are also descendants of Emma. So a little bit of Emma is carried on every single day here on the farm. It's really special. Do you guys have any pig questions? Okay.
Didn't you want to know what was...
Oh, that's an awesome question.
Yeah, what's that thing?
What's that thing? So Itty is a red wattle pig, and those little glands that are hanging from her neck are called wattles. Does anyone want to guess what the purpose of the wattles is? Any guesses?
Water, temperature?
What was that?
To store water?
To store water, temperature, digestion. It was actually a trick question. Your guess is as good as mine. They're kind of one of those things that during the course of evolution has been bred out of the pig, similar to like our wisdom teeth. So some piglets are born with them, some are born without them. There's thought that maybe back in the day this was there to act as like a predator abatement method where an animal might grab the neck and grab one of those wattles as opposed to the animal itself. But nobody actually knows the purpose of those wattles. They're decorative. Yes. It's an awesome question. People ask all the time. All right, guys, we are going to take a walk into our fruit basket orchard. I'll have you follow Sarah. Where is it from?
One of my farmers made on I don't know if you go
I have not been on a farm since I was back home in Louisiana. I've never been on a farm of this magnitude. And to be honest, a lot of the farms that I'm accustomed to seeing are lots of vast sugarcane. And some livestock, but it's usually a lot of sugarcane and a lot of rice. So this is very different. Right. And there's a really big emphasis on community. I do also think a lot of it is being rooted in poverty.
All right. So we are here looking at the fruit basket. So this is our experimental fruit basket. And if you had seen the documentary, you might be familiar with Alan York. He was John and Molly's biodynamic consultant turned mentor and friend. And he really emphasized to John and Molly, we have to have a lot of variety here in order to be really stable, really successful. And so he and Molly, they sat down together and they planned out the fruit basket here. And, originally when John and Molly came here, there were lemons in this orchard. They took them out because they were mature trees. And Molly said, well, let's put in more avocados. That seems like the most fiscally responsible decision, right? And Alan said, no. We have 40 acres of avocados. We have 35 acres of lemons. We don't need more of those. What we need is something that's going to set us apart from the other farms in this region. And we need to experiment. We need to find out what will work well here. And so he and Molly sat down together with a bunch of paper and crayons, and they planned out what they were going to plant and where they were going to plant it here in this orchard. And Alan told Molly, think big, think huge, because we need a lot of variety here. And at first she said, okay, I want 10 different varieties of fruit trees. That seems like a lot. We're a small farm, we're a small operation. And Alan said, no, we need more, right? We need to push the limits. And so he kept pushing her and kept pushing her. And they settled on 75 varieties of fruit trees in this orchard. Not 75 trees, 75 varieties of fruit. And that number has fluctuated some over the years. Today we have about 60 varieties of fruit trees here. And we'll talk about why that is and what's been working and maybe what's not working, what we're learning, right? And so Alan really emphasized that the name of the game here is, not just biodiversity, but experimentation. So like I said, we have about 40 acres of avocados, 35 acres of lemons, but lemons and avocados are two of the top produced crops in Ventura County where we're located. And so they wanted to discover what else can we successfully grow here that is going to be different, that's not only going to do well, but set us apart from the other farms at the markets. So I'll just quickly go through what we have growing here. On the hillside there on the far end of this orchard, we have our citrus section. We have kumquats, limes, oranges, mandarins, and grapefruits. This section, actually right here in front of us, is our stone fruit section. So we have peaches, plums, apricots, nectarines, some different hybrid varieties like pluots, pluaries, nectarplums, apriums. Kind of straight ahead there, we have apples and pears, and then the hillside across the way is our Mediterranean section with figs, persimmons, and pomegranates. And mulberries. How could I forget the mulberries? And they're in season. They're just delicious. But this high level of diversity does create a really healthy and stable immune system for the farm. We are Apricot Lane Farms, right? So if we imagine for just a moment we were only growing apricot trees, and apricots are in the stone fruit family, and they can sometimes be really susceptible to various fungal diseases. And let's say one year some of those apricot trees got one of those fungal diseases, it could easily spread to all of the trees on the farm, and we would potentially have nothing to harvest and nothing to sell, thus interrupting our revenue streams. So by having, the apples planted next to the stone fruit planted next to the citrus, it really ensures that what negatively affects one type of tree, whether it's a pest or disease, it's not going to spread to the tree next to it. So it has become a nice insurance policy for the farm. We'll probably talk about it later when we see our chickens, but this is orchard immunity, right? We talk about flock immunity with some of our birds. Having the different varieties makes sure that not one disease is going to become an epidemic, is going to take everything out. So we have to have this diversity. And additionally, because of this high variety, we are harvesting something out of this orchard just about year round. Our citrus comes in the winter, our stone fruit comes in the summer, our apples, pears, and Mediterraneans come in the fall. So we do have something to harvest and take to our markets year round. So we're constantly having that revenue stream. But we are not perfect by any means, and when John and Molly started this orchard, they kind of threw everything to the wall. They just wanted to see what would work. And now, 14 years into this process, we are really, firmly understanding what is working and what's not working for our climate, for our location, for our customers, right? So we had a section in the middle of this orchard where we were growing 3 acres of sweet cherry trees, and after about 10 years of growing cherries, we kind of just had to throw in the towel and admit that we could not successfully grow cherries in Southern California. If you're familiar with climates for cherries, they need a lot of chill hours. And we just don't get very many here, which is great for some of our other crops, but not for the cherries. We really struggled. And so we did have to make the tough decision to pull the cherries out, but it was, at the time, kind of a new frontier for the farm. At that time, we did have about 10 years of experience under our belts, and we were able to apply that knowledge and that experience to that land. So we planted an acre of brand new peach trees. We were able to integrate our grazing animals into this orchard. Normally we can't because cows and sheep, they're like teenagers. They'll just knock trees over. They don't care. So with some of this open grassy area, we can bring those animals in, introduce their biology to the soil, which is super important as well. We've also done quite a bit of grafting here in this orchard. You've probably heard of grafting before. It's basically a surgical process where you are taking a new varietal or the budwood of a different variety of tree and kind of literally surgically implanting it into the bark of the old tree. So in this scenario, we're able to take advantage of the mature rootstock of a lot of these trees that have been here for 14 years, and instead of cutting them down and starting over with brand new nursery trees that can take several years to kind of kickstart and start to produce, we're able to graft them over to a new variety that we already know does really well for us. It's going to be kind of hard to see, but on the hillside opposite here, we had Midnight Valencia orange trees growing. It was a very similar story as the cherry. It's just the flavor wasn't really there. The yield wasn't really there. So we did graft those over to autumn gold oranges. We were already growing autumn golds, and they're a favorite at our markets. They're not commonly grown in this area, so people get really excited about them. And so we were able to get a yield on those trees much sooner. So that is a really important way that we can narrow our scope and make sure that we're only focusing on the fruit trees and the produce that is the most flavorful, the most nutrient dense. So it's all about sort of observation, intentional practice, and this is kind of what we're left with. So it's been a really exciting sort of approach and long-term experiment. You can see we have some new trees over here as well. Yeah, this is our fruit basket. Any questions about the orchard or the fruit basket?
How many markets do you sell to?
Oh, that's a good question. How many markets are we at? We're at 2 markets during the week, so we're at Wednesday, Santa Monica, and Thursday, Thousand Oaks, which is local to here. And then we're here, we have our farm stand here on farm on Saturdays and Sundays, essentially March through October. And that is in that garden barn that you guys saw, kind of where you were having your earlier talks. That's where our market is. And it's open to the public. Our garden is open to the public, so 10 to 3:30, you can come any weekend. Yeah.
Are there any indicators of like other life or wildlife when like fruit trees are ready to harvest? And like in Minnesota, when the blue jays come, we know like the hazelnuts are ready to go.
Oh, that's cool. I've never had anyone ask that before. If we are noticing wildlife, is that an indication that any produce is ready to be harvested? The only thing I can think where that would be true is with our stone fruit, because it's so soft. It does attract a lot of birds, various birds. Starlings and things like that, and so we do struggle with that. It's less of an indication that the fruit is ready and more of a challenge that we have to kind of contend with. And we do a lot of we'll net trees and do things that we can to try and protect the fruit before it is actually ready. But I love that. I'm actually going to look more into that because I think that's a really interesting kind of wildlife connection to be able to make.
That's a wrap. I gotta hurry home to a baseball game, but I hope you had a lot of fun, and I'll see you in the next video.